Pro Group Management. Workers' comp that works for you.
Welcome to Nevada Newsmakers. On the broadcast today, Nevada State Treasurer Zack here for the whole show on an all-new Nevada Newsmakers. As you know, Reno is booming. Toll's development company is helping it grow with insightful design and development, building community with every project, adding beauty, adding excitement, emphasizing our shared humanity. Reno is becoming bigger. Toll's development is helping it become better, more livable, more enjoyable. To learn more, go to tollsdevelopment.com. tollsdevelopment.com.
Save money and take transit. Did you know you can ride the bus all day for less than what it would cost you for a gallon of gas? Plan your trip now by going to rtcwashoe.com.
For 50 years, Nevada Heating has been keeping people comfortable in their homes. At Nevada Heating, call the Do It Right guys and get the air conditioning back on today. That's the Nevada Heating way. Why sweat for days on end when Nevada Heating can get your air conditioning fixed today? Call us today and we'll fix it today at 323-5585 or schedule us on our website at nevadaheating.com.
Big R in Sparks is located on Bering Boulevard next to Smith's and across from Reed High School. It's a 50,000 square foot clothing store and a whole lot more for work and everyday wear from Noble, Carhartt, Wrangler, and Ariat. They have hats and an extensive selection of gloves. Big R on Bering Boulevard in Sparks next to Smith's across from Reed High School. Big R. Hardware, clothing, and a whole lot more.
This is Nevada Newsmakers with host Sam Shad, a no-holds-barred political forum. Now, from the Nevada Newsmakers broadcast headquarters, here is Sam Shad.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we are pleased to welcome back to the program the husband of the Fourth Lady of Nevada, Zack, who is the Nevada State Treasurer. Pleasure to have you back on the program, sir.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for just acknowledging what my most important role is.
Absolutely. Let's talk about something that has been striking me a lot this last year, which is in politics, we have just ended up in this childlike me, where nobody really knows what anybody stands for, and everybody just knows who to hate. Whereas in your last campaign, you actually did what they call in the theater, broke through the fourth wall, which is where you talk to the audience directly, and yours was the most memorable campaign commercial in that cycle. So my first question is, who was the one who created that concept? And B, don't you think that that should be what we're looking at, which is more of a marketing angle for candidates, rather than this, you're horrible, no, you're horrible, no, you're worse, no, you're worse?
Well, I think it would be better generally if we spent our time both trying to get elected office and being in elected office actually talking about the work that we're going to do and why we're going to do it. And in that ad, which was put together by a company called AL Media that has won awards for it, as well they should have, as well as our team, Eric Jimenez and others, when we put that ad together, we knew that we weren't going to have the budget to do 10 different ads, right? We needed to hit one shot really, really well off the tee straight into the pin, and I think we did. But we were able to do it by focusing not just on the absurdity of the situation that we found ourselves in electorally, but on the work that we had done, right? And I think that the more that we're able to focus on politics, less on just the gamesmanship of the whole thing, but more on the work and the why, right? When we have a treasurer who's doing a good job, there's more money to pay for things like schools and teachers and roads and healthcare and mental health. And that's what we thought it was important to focus on, and we just kind of kept going back to it. Now, granted, it was a little bit funny, but we got a little game there, Sam, and we wanted to make sure that we could share it.
Well, I mean, yes, it was a little bit funny, but I mean, it broke through between all the I mean, quite frankly, and this program carries political advertising, so I mean, I may be cutting my own throat when I say this, but I mean, you get to a certain point in an election cycle where people just tune it all out because it's like everybody's horrible. And, you know, that's where we find ourselves politically in this country. And I think that for the country to be successful and to get past Thanksgiving dinner every day, Thanksgiving dinner where Uncle Joe gets drunk and starts, blathering on everybody, goes, oh, it's just Uncle Joe. Now it's, every meal that we have with friends, family, whatever, the political arguments come up, and I think we need to get back to the middle, and I think that you are in the middle. I think that you're willing, I know from lobbyists I talk to who have relationships with you, that they say that you're somebody who listens to all sides and makes decisions based on all sides, rather than just being, you're a Democrat, but you're willing to listen to other people.
Well, I've found generally that success is in the middle, right? Success is finding out what a majority of people need and want, but not at the expense of other people. And, functionally, the treasurer is the state's chief investment officer. We've talked about this.
Right.
And investing outside of what you're trying to do in it, but the how is by listening and reading and absorbing as much as humanly possible. And that means you can't go into a scenario knowing what the outcome is going to be, knowing which opinion is the best opinion, because if you do, you're going to miss everything else.
All right, but I mean, in so many other cases, every office has become so politically charged, and yet, in a way, and you're running in your second term now, so you don't have to worry about this, but do you think that this office, the treasurer's office and the controller's office, should actually be a nonpartisan office?
I don't, and one of the reasons I don't is because it's important for people to know who that they are getting behind, and who you choose to spend your time with, I think is an important judge of character. It's not the only judge of character, and certainly there are Democrats who believe things that I don't, similar to, I'm sure there are Republicans who believe things that Controller Matthews doesn't. But I think it's helpful to know what side of the fence we're on, especially when some of the partisan things that we look at as attacks are really less partisan and more just way of life, right? The ability to choose who we love, the ability to make decisions for our family, the ability to say that we should be spending more time teaching kids than teaching them how to hide in the corner in the case of an active shooter. Those things, unfortunately, are partisan now. They shouldn't be, because I think objectively they make sense for a majority of Nevadans, but they are. And so I think that, having the treasurer, the controller, and a lot of the other offices, right, that in some states are ministerial, they're appointed by the governor, but having them as independently elected and partisan bodies allows you to attract different sorts of people. Sometimes that's bad, but it does allow you to get a broader group of individuals who might be interested in running, and hopefully gets you a better candidate at the end and a better elected.
Have you talked to your kids about an active shooter situation? You have young kids?
We have.
How was that?
Awful. Just absolutely awful. Both awful from a acute perspective and awful from the fact that we as a society needs to spend time on that versus all the other things we can spend. Having kids is glorious, right? Like the
Sure.
moment where you teach them something that they didn't know for the first time, and you point out a bald eagle, and they say, well, why is it bald? Because it has feathers on its head. And you say, well, that refers to the white crest, which comes on about a year and a half in. That's glorious, right? You never forget those moments. But you also never forget the moments where you're teaching them how to figure out what exit is away from the loud noise if they need to have it, or where to go in a bad situation. Now, luckily, they are 9 and 6 and 6, and they are joyous and they are happy a majority of the time. But the fact that we as a society have to weave that in along with multiplication tables is insane.
Has that given you empathy for African American families that have to have the talk?
Yes, I think it's. I can't put myself, right? I mean, as
Right.
empathetic as someone would be, I can't put myself in the shoe of families who have dealt with oppression for generations, right? Both systemic and just acute. But I think what we're able to do, what I think we're all able to do, or should be able to do, is realize that everyone's go through this world can be a little bit tough, and the more kindness we can share, and just frankly, back to your original point, the more listening we can do, the better off we're going to be.
Nobody goes through life unchallenged.
No.
All right, let's take a break. We'll come back more with the state treasurer after this timeout.
The casino industry drove Nevada's economy for decades. By the 1990s, however, the state's sole industry was in sharp decline. Many were losing their homes, many were leaving the state. Is Reno on track to be the Detroit of the West? Was an October 2010 Reno Gazette-Journal headline. Nevada knew it was time for a change and a time to diversify. Story County took that lead, took risks, invested tens of millions transforming its desert into a place of opportunity and a future for Nevada families needing something new. That desert now provides thousands of high-paying tech, advanced manufacturing, and energy careers at companies like Tesla, Panasonic, Google, Switch, and Redwood Materials. Story County transformed northern Nevada forever, and the tide of opportunity has raised all vessels through construction contracts, high-paying careers, and the power of payroll. Tens of millions have been generated in sales and property tax, permits, and other revenues for Reno, Sparks, Washoe County, and for all of Nevada. Enough, in fact, to generate a surplus after public services are provided. And best of all, a sustainable economic climate has been created, enabling our children to stay in Nevada and live prosperous lives in their home state. Story County, improving northern Nevada one industry at a time.
The Nevada Builders Alliance has been protecting the interests of the construction industry for over 50 years. Our programs save members thousands of dollars every year and allow them to provide much-needed benefits to their employees. Our industry also allows Nevada to grow. If you're thinking about a career in the construction industry, reach out. And if you haven't thought of a career in construction, what are you waiting for? We are the Nevada Builders Alliance.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we continue our conversation with Zack Conine. He is the Nevada State Treasurer. Let's talk about the financial markets. Now, obviously, you have to be extremely conservative in the way that you invest the state's money. But you look at the markets, you look at what the Fed is doing. As we tape this on the morning of the 24th of July, where do things sit as far as you're concerned?
Well, from a state perspective, a little different than an economic perspective, so let's talk just from a state investment perspective first. We are absolutely hitting the cover off the ball. More than 80% of the new revenue that was found in the final economic forum before the budget closed came from additional Treasury investment returns, and we think we're going to exceed that.
Really? Wow.
Yes, we believe that this past year was probably, and we'll confirm this in the next couple of days, but one of the best investment return years in the history of the state. We are absolutely crushing it in our investment office. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Fed has raised rates. We have been prepared for that raising, and the short side of the curve, right, the kind of limited maturity, 6 months or less period, is paying quite a bit. And so we're able to make sure that we have the liquidity and the risk protection that the state needs, while at the other side just making money hand over fist. Now, it does look economically like we are coming in for a bit more of a soft landing. Obviously, recession fears continue to be out there, and there's a lot of families that are hurting, right? Whether they're hurting at a little bit less at the pump now than last time we talked, but they're hurting at the grocery store. They're hurting if they're fighting an eviction, given all that's happening on that front. And so the work of the state continues, right? Trying to make sure that we have protections in place and that the safety net that we all pay for actually works when people unfortunately fall into it.
Are you looking at the Fed to potentially raise interest rates at least one more time in this next go-around?
You know, if I knew exactly what the Fed was going to do, I'd probably have a different job in a much larger boat. I don't have a boat, I should mention. But we expect...
Honesty and integrity, that's what I like about you.
We expect, and a boat desire, but we expect that there will be some level of increased raise before the end of the year. The market is certainly pricing that, and then a couple of smaller declines next year, right? Now, functionally, we don't expect that the trend line down will be as steep as the trend line up, which means that we're going to have high rates for a little bit of time, and we see what that means to the economy, right? We see how difficult it can be to get a mortgage if your mortgage rate is 3% higher than it would have been 18 months ago, just what that means for home prices and affordability. We see what it does to construction starts, right? And the ability for banks to loan money to get buildings off the ground and therefore get people to work. And so we're watching it pretty carefully. It's an amazing opportunity for us on the investment side, but of course, right across the hall from investments is debt. We are going to go to market later this year with a bond issuance, probably the largest bond issuance in the history of the state, given our strong financial position. You know, it'll be around $500 million. And that bond issuance will support a number of new state buildings, the ability for us to kind of get all state employees. in Southern Nevada, in the same area, create some legislative buildings in Southern Nevada, which is sorely needed for quite some time, but also just continue kind of the good fiscal management of the state. But we're going to be doing that in an environment that will be more expensive than the last time we issued debt, which was, as a reminder, the cheapest interest rate that the state has ever issued debt on in its history, thanks strongly in part to our highest ever credit rating.
All right, so, you know, historically, and when I say historically, I'm talking like the last 30 years, a 5% interest rate is not a high interest rate.
No.
We had these unbelievably low interest rates for a long time for a lot of different reasons. But don't we need, you know, for the banking industry and we've talked about this before, for senior citizens who have saved their money all their lives, to have somewhere in the 4 or 5% interest rate range? We don't want to see the 17% that we saw back in the inflation days of Jerry Ford. But don't we really need to see these rates around 5? And isn't the housing industry repricing itself, buying down you know, interest rates for customers? So isn't everything adjusting to accommodate this new rate?
Yeah, and the wonderful thing about capital markets, when you allow them to work the way they're supposed to do, is they will eventually adjust, right? But those periods of adjustment are often real painful for people who are going through the process of buying a home or going through the process of selling a home, right? Who thought that their home was worth X, and now they find in the market it's worth, you know, 80% of X. Absolutely, we certainly don't want to get back to the level of inflation that we had in the past, or the level of interest rates that we had in the past, right? That can just create massive wealth disruption and cause a lot of problems. We have been in a period as a country of cheap money for a long time, and cheap money has been great from an innovation perspective. It certainly increases people's ability to take risks and try new products and spend money on R&D and the rest, but on the other side, cheap money makes it easier for businesses or ideas that maybe shouldn't have survived to survive a little bit longer, and that will create a little bit of churn. There is no right answer, right? There is no, if interest rates are here, everything is perfect.
Right.
But what you want is as little disruption as possible going from place to place, and you want a government that is prepared to take advantage of that. You know, for the first time ever, as far as we can tell, our Treasury was prepared for those rising interest rates. We were watching the market. I think I've mentioned this before, but I'm the first treasurer in the history of the state that actually has a Bloomberg terminal, which is a little strange, but is what it is. And so we are watching this like a hawk, and our investments team, which isn't so good, has been able to take advantage of each of these raises, none of which were surprises, but all of which were opportunities for the state to make just a little bit more money, and that's what we're about.
The other part of this is that the Fed's target was 2% inflation rate. And to reach that, because that was, in the Fed's opinion, good for the economy. But if you look at it over a 5-year period, without compounding, that's a 10% increase in costs. So we haven't had that up until recently for years. So people should really expect that the cost of things does go up over time.
The cost of things does go up over time, right? And I think the Fed has done a remarkable job moving an incredibly complex plane through the air with effectively one lever, right? They're just, you know, from a monetary policy perspective, there aren't that many choices that they get to make. What are we going to buy, and what's the target interest rate going to be? But outside of that, they're just kind of subject to all the market forces that are around. And I think, at least so far, they have done just a fantastic job of not having the wheels come off the bus while they try to tamp down on inflation. And we've seen it, right? Inflation has fallen dramatically. We've seen it in durable goods. We've seen it in consumer discretionary goods. We've seen it kind of across the board, that a combination of supply chain issues, which of course we were seeing certainly a year ago, have started to get cleared up, right? That the cost to ship a shipping container across the sea has fallen back to pre-pandemic levels, which of course makes it a lot easier for goods and services to move, goods and the services they supply. And so, you know, I think all of that is starting to work out in the way that it should, and I commend the Fed and the President, frankly, for the work they've done getting that done.
Do you see the cost of food dropping? Because it seems to me that that price is not going to go down significantly, and everybody who goes to a grocery store, and I'm the one in the family that goes to a grocery store, has seen a dramatic increase in the cost of food.
And we've seen it start to mellow a little bit, but I think one of the things that you generally see on pricing, we see this on gas, we see this on grocery items, we see this on almost everything, is that when the price rises, it will rise very quickly and it will fall a little bit more slowly, right? And thus is the profit margin. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I expect we'll see prices decline, but over a longer period of time, certainly not over a short one.
Are you seeing great interest in the bonds that you're going to issue?
Yes. Yeah, and we actually have seen so much interest and starting to get interest from retail investors. Usually when the state, when most states or municipalities sell, they do an auction, they sell to the highest bidder. In other words,
Sure.
the one that is willing to take the least interest rate for this, which is why it's so important that we have as many banks and other entities doing the underwriting work here in the state, because when there are more folks, you get competition. I'll make that as a slight aside. The folks in Texas who are now keeping certain banks and entities out of Texas because they don't like sort of the ethos of the company, they're actually paying more in interest rates because they have less competition. It's crazy how things work. But we usually sell to one entity, and then that entity syndicates. One of the things we're looking at, not for this bond issuance, but for an issuance in the future, is we actually want to start selling bonds directly, retail bonds directly to Nevadans, because we keep getting calls. Folks who are interested in not just investing in the state that they love, but investing with something that's managed as well as we've been able to manage the Treasury.
Is that common in other states?
So a couple of states do it. It's a fair amount of work, and so I think our team wants to make sure that we can do it right, and we want to do it not on one of the larger issuances, but basically we have a large issuance in session years, and then what I would call a cleanup issuance in off-session years. The bonds work exactly the same, but the dollar amount's different, and so we're going to work through and try to do it next year and see how it goes.
Does the full faith of the state back those bonds?
Of course.
So what would that mean if things went south?
Well, so all of the bonds that we issue from a state perspective, for the most part, are general obligation bonds, which means they're a general obligation of the state, which means that we will take revenues from anything to pay those bonds. They're the last thing that doesn't get paid. So functionally, that usually means that they're supported by property tax in almost all cases. After that property tax is extinguished, we can go to any other source of revenue, which means that at some point you'd need to cut services. But it's important to remember here that for that to happen, a series of things have to go wrong. One, we keep about 1.5 times to 2 times whatever we have to pay in interest for the next year is already in the bank.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why our credit rating is so high. Our rainy day fund, which is something that would be tapped to pay those bonds if we needed to, is over $904 million right now. We're about to make a $260 or so million deposit into it, thanks to SB 431 of the last legislative session, plus a little bit more than $50 million from the beginning of the next fiscal year. And then in a couple of months, we'll have well, we'll see what the ending fund balance looks like after everything shakes out with ARPA, but we should have another significant chunk of change to put in, which will put our rainy day fund at not just its highest level ever, but actually one of the highest rainy day funds in the country from a days of operating spend. So these bonds are full faith and credit of the state. They're the last thing that we would stop paying. And I think that's one of the reasons why they have so much interest, not just from the public markets, which is great because that saves us all in interest payments, but from the individual market, from the retail investor.
All right, let's take another break. Back with the State Treasurer after this timeout.
What do you count on? You count on your power every day. At NV Energy, we've always powered what's important to you, but we're not looking at the past. We're focused on the future. While our standards are high, our rates will remain low. And our commitment to renewables isn't just meeting standards, but leading the way. Because you can count on more than just your power. You can count on the company who brings it to you. That's our promise. You can count on it.
Safety is the #1 priority for the trucking industry. Over $7 billion a year is spent on technology like this electronic eye that will apply the brakes automatically. But the most important factor for safety is the truck driver. These hardworking men and women who safely move over 70% of our nation's freight and 94% of Nevada's. We thank you because trucks move America forward.
Pro Group Management is the place where companies can find workers' comp solutions that are designed to meet their specific business requirements. As regulations evolve, Pro Group takes a proactive approach to clear the path to make sure your business stays ahead of the curve. Knowing your workers' comp program is optimized, you can focus on other important matters related to your growing business. Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we continue our conversation with Zack Conine. He's the Nevada State Treasurer. My favorite topic over the last 6 to 8 months has been the Ivanpah Airport, the airport with no name, as it is called, because they came up with a town now through the legislature. Does this come into your purview at all? Do you have to look at this? Because Jim Gibson, the chair of the Clark County Commission, was saying the 2019 appraisal of what it would cost would be $12 billion.
It's a big number, and it's absolutely necessary, right?
Of course.
We've seen Harry Reid International's bursting at the seams. That team does a fantastic job getting planes in and out, getting dollars in and out, right? That's sort of like the lifeblood of our economy. But as we see more folks wanting to come in on the commercial side, we see that there are more folks on the freight side who can't come in, right? There are just so many slots. There's just so many times to land a plane. And so the ability for the state to expand our capacity is going to be absolutely necessary. I don't know what that number is going to be, but I think our office, as with most things that are really expensive, will get involved to try and figure out a way to make it a little bit cheaper and to, more importantly, leverage all of the money that's coming into the state through the Infrastructure Innovation and Jobs Act, which is now a law, right, and through the other bills that Congress is doing, working with our federal delegation, as we always do, to make sure that when federal dollars could come to the state, they could. The amazing thing is we have just a real crack team at the airport. They do a really good job, right? Both in keeping us safe, but also making sure that we have all the carriers that we need to have. I think our focus, right, especially through the infrastructure bank, is going to be on that surrounding area, right? What does that surrounding area need? How can we possibly help and leverage some of the relationships and the pension dollars that we've been able to collect and attract to Nevada to make sure that we can help build out the area around it.
All right, and that's where we got to leave it, but definitely more to come on that topic. And we'll be right back. Thank you for being here.
Of course. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Like a traditional handmade basket, retail is woven into the fabric of life in Nevada. From big box to mom and pop, retail supports our communities in countless ways. Jobs for the disabled, team uniforms for kids, help for the elderly, and so much more. Retail employs over 1 in 10 workers. Retail supports Nevada, and we support retail.
RANNV.org.
Carson Valley Inn, it's your place for the good times. Carson Valley Inn.
Modern boutique Ahern Hotel and Event Center sits at the heart of the Las Vegas Strip. 2 floors of meeting and event space are ideal for groups and conventions. Stay in one of 200 luxurious rooms and suites. Brand your event throughout the property. Flexible event spaces make for easy planning and personalization. Take over the entire hotel with a full buyout option.
Thanks for watching Nevada Newsmakers. You can catch us online 24 hours a day at nevadanewsmakers.com, or you can download the podcast wherever you like to get your podcast. We'll see you on the next broadcast.